It's time to talk about mental health. We define our stories and we claim our space.
Asking for support for your mental health is such a courageous act and takes so much strength, and also honoring of your own well-being.
Let's act to change so we can act to heal.
Healing is empowerment. Healing is strength.
Hello, I'm Miguel Cardona, U.S. Secretary of Education. Thank you, Act to Change, for convening this event and having me on once again. Our work to combat racism, hate, and bullying, and to support the creation of hopeful, inclusive communities is more important than ever. This month, the nation celebrates Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It's a moment to lift up and honor the contributions of our AAPI community members to our whole nation. And it's a moment to recognize we still have a lot of work to do. We must remove barriers to equity and opportunity and ensure the contributions of all Americans are valued. I also want to take this opportunity to recognize that today marks the birthday of Vincent Chin, whose death 40 years ago marked an important turning point in activism to combat anti-Asian hate crimes in this country. Over the last few years, and especially amid the pandemic, there's been an increase in bullying against our AAPI students and educators. In 2020, AAPI hate crimes increased nearly 150% across America's biggest cities. This is unacceptable. For all Americans, this should be a call to action to fight against hate. I believe we're all part of the same American family. You matter. And we at the Department of Education are here to work with you to advance equity, access, and acceptance in our schools and in our communities. The concerns of the AAPI students, families, and educators are real. They must be addressed. Just last year, our Office for Civil Rights reminded schools of their obligation to address harassment of students, including our AAPI students, on the basis of their race, color, or national origin. We need to confront systemic racism and injustice, both within and outside our education systems. I look forward to collaborating with groups like Act to Change to develop comprehensive and successful approaches to advancing equity for all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Malik Pancholi, and I'm a co-founder of Act to Change. I am so honored to welcome you all for the 4th annual AAPI Day Against Bullying and Hate. For those of you who are not familiar with Act to Change, back in October 2015, President Obama's White House Initiative on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, in partnership with the Sikh Coalition and the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, launched Act to Change, a national public awareness campaign on bullying prevention among youth, including Asian American, Pacific Islander, Sikh, Muslim, LGBTQI, and immigrant youth. Act to Change is now a grassroots nonprofit and continues to empower students, families, activists, and educators with the knowledge and tools they need to help stop and prevent bullying in their communities. Over the past few years, we have worked to celebrate, honor, and uplift the pioneers and the role models across various industries who have paved the way for so many of us and have provided our youth with the representation they deserve. Let's take a look at some of the highlights.
There's something about comedy that allows for us to put people at ease, but I think when you're trying to tackle something that's uncomfortable, which normally people would dismiss or not pay attention to, or have the defenses up and feel guilt, it's comedy that allows them to listen, but it doesn't mean that there isn't discomfort there.
You have to walk into everything knowing that you could get like 5,000 nice comments, and it just takes that one comment to really ruin your day. There's could be 10,000 people telling you you're beautiful and one person to call you ugly, and you'll believe that one person.
I have active memories of hiding under an umbrella because I didn't want to get a shade darker. I knew if I went home, my mother would cry because that wasn't considered beautiful. And I fundamentally believe that that kind of mindset can change with this generation if we all do our part to change it.
We are so essential and integral to the fabric of America. I want everyone to know that they have the power within to change not only themselves, but to also change the world.
getting professional mental help is nothing to be ashamed of. It's like getting help for a physical injury too. There's no shaming getting surgery for a broken foot, so getting a healthcare professional to take care of your brain is also completely normal and good.
When it comes to South Asian representation, we get a few stories. We get arranged marriage, we get terrorism, we get mythology, we get religion. But those are the stories that people see us as. And my point is, I don't think we're ever going to feel like we're part of the majority community if we're not able to tell stories about the mundane as we do as much about the extraordinary.
Living through what we're living through now, I feel like collectively we are rewriting the master narrative of America and American history and who belongs and who gets to define who an American is in this country.
Don't let anybody tell you that you don't belong exactly where you are. You being here is the result of your parents or your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents risking everything in order to build a new life for your family. That is your Asian American story.
You are powerless over what other people say about you, but you are powerful in how you respond. And if you choose to respond with dignity and kindness, when you do have a strong sense of self and you know the truth about who you are, that is what will carry you through the tough times.
This year, Act to Change is uniting to heal. May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, but it is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And we want to celebrate and highlight these overlapping themes in our communities and to honor this important day with bravery, honesty, and vulnerability. We are so excited that you're joining us today as we work to dismantle the stigma around mental health and to heal as a community. We have such amazing guests with us who have graciously offered to share their experiences around persevering and maintaining their mental health throughout. We are joined by record-breaking athletes like Jeremy Lin and Mirai Nagasu, world-renowned journalists and viral movement makers Lisa Ling and Michelle Lee. We have an actor who is proud of all of his identities, Nick Dodani, and we have an activist and talented actress, Purna Jagannathan. And last but not least, we have 4 exceptionally inspiring youth from across the country who will be joining us with a wonderful AAPI psychotherapist, Ivy Kwong, to show us all how we can all take care of ourselves and our mental health in a much more meaningful way. Please stick around with us for the entire event because I know that you will leave feeling hopeful, inspired, and empowered. Here we go, friends.
My name is Belinda Lay, and I proudly serve as a managing director on the board of Act to Change. I have the honor of speaking to the world-renowned award-winning journalist, television personality, and author, Lisa Ling. Lisa has told countless stories over the decades around various issues and has always made a point to shine a light on mental health, the impacts of the pandemic on the AAPI community, and all the ways in which we are all working and uniting to heal.
Thanks so much for having me.
You were really on the front lines covering the pandemic and all the anti-Asian hate protests. Can you tell us, what are some of the lessons you've learned, especially in covering some of the rising incidents of anti-Asian violence?
I've gotten to a point where I can tell other people's stories fairly well, but when attacks on our community started to happen en masse, when the pandemic took root in this country, it was incredibly destabilizing for me and so many of us because we didn't know how to talk about it. And when we really look back on Asian American history or the lack thereof in this country, the fact that we aren't introduced to stories about the contributions that Asian Americans have made in this country or the challenges and the struggles that our community has endured, it's become really easy to erase us, not include us, and even in some cases dehumanize our community. You know, when there's no reference for one's inclusion, it becomes so much easier to dehumanize an entire population. And so it's been challenging, but the silver lining in all of it is that I think because those who have been perpetrating the discrimination and violence onto the Asian American community don't discriminate between Asians, right? They aren't discerning about whether they are attacking Chinese people or Korean people or Filipino people. it has propelled our community to come together in a way that I've never experienced in my lifetime. And it's been this movement that has risen up in the wake of the hate and discrimination has been really, really empowering and moving for me. And it's been really reassuring to literally feel like I am holding the hands of my fellow Asian Americans in this fight to combat hate.
I wholeheartedly resonate with that sense of erasure, especially as an Asian American female. It does feel as if the model minority myth, the stereotypes that come with being Asian, especially as someone who has immigrant parents as well, it feels as if for too long, our thoughts, our feelings, our unique set of backgrounds have been erased. I know you've also managed to carry the weight of the hurt and the pain of so many of the stories you've heard around the world. What has kept you going after all of these decades of being a world-renowned journalist?
The fact that I know in my work that I am conveying our shared humanity. And I can't think of anything more important for me to be able to do right now. We are currently experiencing a culture that is highly discriminatory, highly vitriolic. It's angry, it's afraid. We are angry, we are afraid. I have this incredible opportunity to really engage with people who are very different from me, engage with people who are probably very different from you, people you may have heard about, read about, thought you've known about, but never really gotten a chance to get to know. And in my work, I've gotten that opportunity to really immerse myself and get to know communities that are different from mine. And my hope is that people will watch my work, come to it with an open mind, and be prepared to possibly even feel compassion for your fellow human. My hope in my work is that I've been able to bring people closer together and have allowed people to get to know people that they otherwise might never have an opportunity to get to know.
As you know, this year's Act to Change May 18th event is centered around mental health and fighting back against the stigmas in our community. And in 2014, you were open about how you were diagnosed with ADHD. In the AAPI community, especially, we are often not very open about being neurodivergent in any way. Can you share with us, especially to our youth audience, how did this impact your career?
Well, I have been covering so many stories about mental health recently, but throughout my career. And yes, I became very open about my ADD diagnosis in my 30s. It was something that I suspected that I had throughout my youth. I just had a really hard time focusing in class when I was, inside of a classroom. And it wasn't until I got this chance to travel and be in the world and work on a whole range of different kinds of stories simultaneously with teams that supported me, that I realized that I could almost even hyper focus when I was working on those kinds of stories. But growing up in the Asian culture, right? We are one that is so concerned with achievement. There's so much emphasis on success in our community, and I really struggled, and I had a hard time communicating about these struggles. I carried a lot of shame around it, and when I reached my early 20s, I realized that I had all these insecurities. I had these challenges with being able to focus, and so I got myself into therapy. Um, and it was probably the smartest thing that I had ever done. And it opened up this whole world to me and propelled me to ask questions of myself that I hadn't even thought about the answers to. And for me, it gave me a chance to really talk about these things that were really big impediments. We tend to repress and we tend not to be communicative about things that plague us internally. And my hope is that with greater communication, with more conversations like these, we can encourage one another to break that cycle. In some ways, we are sort of carrying on this generational cycle of silence and of repression. And it's hugely detrimental. And if I can convey anything to our community, especially in this time of crisis and unpredictability, it is, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for professional help if you need it. I'm actually working on a story as we speak about mental illness here in Los Angeles. And I have been working with this law enforcement team here in LA. We were called out to an apartment complex because there was a woman who was on the second floor of a building. She pulled up the screen and she was threatening to take her life. And she was just screaming profanities and just complete incoherent things. And I talked to the woman's sister who said, this is not my sister. This has been going on since January. And my sister she graduated from UCLA and she's a social worker and she helps kids, but she was experiencing this psychotic, breakthrough, or she was having this episode that was triggered by something that her sister couldn't identify. This woman happened to have a history of mental illness. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when she was 14, 15. But this is a time in our late teens, early 20s, when mental illness can really start to manifest. And in the past, we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the resources to help ourselves, but we do have them now. And so if you are starting to feel like something's not right, if you're starting to feel high degrees of anxiety or sadness, there are tools that you can start building in your toolbox to heal, to make yourself better. And it's at this time where you really need to focus on those things. This woman's sister told me that her sister is such a good an intelligent person who hasn't been taking her medication regularly, but once she gets back onto her medication and back onto her regimen, like, she's an incredibly capable and competent person. She's just kind of fallen off track a little bit. And so I think for all of us, we need to be aware of those cries for help among members of our community. But if this is you and you are starting to feel things that don't feel normal, start asking questions, start talking to people, because our generation, your generation, has tools at our disposal that literally didn't exist years ago. And so to me, there is always hope, and everyone can heal. You just have to be aware when you need to get that healing.
And so many of these stories end with the fact that they feel as if their stories cannot be heard. We constantly strive towards creating a community where all youth can feel that they can speak up about their identities. They can speak up when they need that help. There's so much advice that you have, and it sounds like you didn't reach out to a mental health professional as well until your early 20s. If you were to go to your 16-year-old self and you had a piece of advice for her, what would it be?
That you're not alone. It's okay to have these feelings of confusion and inadequacy. There is help available. You just have to reach out for it. And if you experience any kind of trauma, whether it's the divorce of a parent, the death of a loved one, not getting into the school that you want to those kinds of things can trigger a reaction. And it's so crucial to try to resolve those things, or again, develop those tools for your toolbox to help you deal with those kinds of challenges. Because when you repress those things and they continue to go unresolved, they will manifest themselves sometime in your life and could affect the rest of your life, and could manifest in very negative ways. And so being acutely aware of the things that trigger you, or the things that just propel you to just not feel right, it's so, so crucial that you seek out help. And, I think so many of us, we have these resources available to us at the tip of our fingertips on our phone. But what I will say to the young people who are listening to this is try to seek out human connection. There's no replacement for human connection. So often I think we're seeking validation from people that we might not even know via social media. It's so, so important to try and engage with real people, with real humans.
Thank you so much for your honesty and vulnerability. We are extremely grateful for your passion and dedication to uplifting the AAPI community, our voices and stories. And of course, we appreciate your support of Act to Change. And I know that everyone watching, myself included, is feeling empowered and inspired by your work.
Thank you so much, Belinda. And thank you to everyone at Act to Change for the incredible work that you all do.
Thanks, Lisa. And for those of you watching, please stay tuned for a conversation between Act to Change board member Rue Bhatt and the lovely Purna Jagannathan.
My name is Rue Bhatt, and I proudly serve as an inaugural member on the board with my friend Purna Jagannathan, an established Indian American actress that has been making waves since her appearances on HBO's The Night Of, on Big Little Lies, and what you probably know her best for, her role as Nalini, Devi's mother on the hit Netflix series Never Have I Ever. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Purna. Hey there.
Hi.
So, Purna, I just want to a colossal success. And last season, it really highlighted Devi's mental health as we see her coping with depression, anxiety, hyperperformance, all expected trauma responses after the loss of her father. I think this may have been the first time we've really seen something like this on screen. So I'm curious for you, in playing Devi's mother, right? What was it like playing that role, knowing about the community and the barriers that the community in general, the Indian American community in general, has towards mental health?
Yeah, so two things. One is I think it's so transformational to see a brown person in therapy, but I always think, well, there are a lot of us in therapy, but it happens more as adults, that we've broken away from the family system a little bit. We've torn ourselves away from the stigma and now are in the healing process as adults for what we couldn't be in as children. Just to see a child in therapy is really groundbreaking. And I think it's Mindy Kaling and Lang Fisher who just added this very essential central element to Devi's storyline and her ability to grow through the seasons. The funny thing about Devi's mom is Devi has probably ended up in therapy not so much because of Devi's mom. It's more despite of it. She says the first season, I don't believe in therapy. I think it's for white people. And it's such a iconic line because it just represents what our communities, how much they look down upon that. And I do think even Nalini being with the therapist for that short amount of time has a breakthrough herself just by letting her vulnerability show up and her healing process begin. So it's such a pro therapy message on this show, and I couldn't be prouder of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm 40 now, and I only started therapy probably like 4 years ago. And I certainly was like, whoa, where was this my whole life? I really wish I had someone, a trusted person that I could talk to that didn't have any skin in the game, no judgment. And I could literally say anything that came across my mind. And it's been so transformative to me, be on the other side and help me heal with the trauma that I've had or whatever it may be.
The last season, there's what I love about the writing of the show is that they portray, the writers have this uncanny ability to portray an immigrant mother in all the ways that we think of an immigrant mother and know an immigrant mother and all the things that we just imbibe. And it's so funny about immigrant mothers, but they also just put tremendous amount of flesh on Nalini, and in the last season you see her explore this idea of a new relationship, explore this idea of taking care of herself, of dressing up, of trying to get out of the house and out of her own shell. And you know, in that gorgeous kind of moment that Nalini and Devi have, which is Devi says, you know, I can't believe you've moved on from dad so fast after she catches her mom with this other man. And you know, and Nalini says, I haven't, you know, I just haven't moved on. I think I'm just trying to like deal with the pain and things like that. And it's such, again, this show is such a slow unfolding of what moving forward can look like. And no one has healed yet. No one's moved on. No one has forgotten that the father is such a central figure. The ghost of the father and the father is such a central figure through the storyline. This is a story of moving forward without moving on, and what that looks like.
Even if you lose that meaningful connection with someone, it's almost survival in order to create more, right? Other connection, and bringing it back to sort of the mental health. If your mental health is in the way of stopping you from making connections, then that's something that folks really need to think about.
For me, the first time that a brown widow has been portrayed with any sense of sexuality in this book, there's really such little depiction of what a single mother or widowed woman, her inner life and her desires and her, you know, what pulls her apart and what puts her back together. There's no information. There's no portrayal. Right. So it's very empowering character play, because you are breaking ground just by showing her as a three-dimensional character.
Devi's character sitting in therapy, you know, your character expressing her sexuality post, you know, the death of her husband, is just such an important message that so many people in our community need to see in order to know this is okay. You know?
Yeah, I think at the essence, the show is built around what trauma and grief looks like, you know, and the behaviors and what we go towards and what we run away. It's that's the center of the story.
Yeah. And so, you know, on that note, you've actually been very outspoken about your survivorship as a sexual assault survivor. And, you know, you were a part of one of the most incredibly powerful, honest, heartbreaking, and necessary productions, Nirbhaya, in 2015. And now that featured real life testimonies of Indian women and sexual assault survivors. Tell me a little bit, what was it like to be part of this production?
You know, I always say that Nirbhaya, it's a play, and in the play, 5 women come forward, including me, about our real life stories of sexual violence, rape, and gender-based violence. And I always say that the play doesn't end when the curtain falls. It actually kind of begins when the curtain falls, because after each show, we have time, time set aside in each city that we've played in around the world for the audience to also step up and break their silence. And I'd ask the question, which is, raise your hand if you've survived sexual violence. And, 60% of people's hands would go up, no matter if we were in Dublin or New York or Delhi or Toronto. That's the amount. And then, we get all these letters the next day saying, I couldn't put my hand up last night, but I really wanted to. So it was an intense process of us breaking our silence. It was an invitation to the audience to step forward in the space that the company had created to break their own silence. We started this play right after the gang rape in India of Jyoti Singh Pandey. She was raped in December 2012. We were putting this play together by January 2013. And so we performed for many, many years. And what we saw was the beginning of the Me Too movement. We saw, if you dare to put your truth out there, you will always be met with someone coming to you with theirs.
Your strength in bringing that story not only to the production but with us today is truly commendable, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you for doing so.
Thank you. I have the privilege of speaking out. It is I have a safe space. I have my family who has always been supportive. I have a career that I'm not in jeopardy of losing, or if I lost something, that it wouldn't be the end of my existence, So I just want to say, and I do always do encourage people, if you do have the privilege of speaking out, please consider it. It's been a couple of years since we did Nearby. It's almost been 10 years since we did the play. And in those 10 years, I can really see this massive change. I had just turned 40. And I remember just this taking stock of the tremendous growth that's happened over the last decade, which is if you claim the true narrative of your own life with actual true words. So a lot of people will use, the word molest when they mean rape. Right. If you claim the events of your life in their rawness and their truthfulness, and it's a process, it has tremendous power to make you whole. Even just being a person of color, there's such a feeling of every room that I go into, or every set, or I used to work in corporate America, every boardroom, there was always this feeling like I wasn't quite complete. I mean, it's not the imposter syndrome. Like there was something that someone was going to find. There was just something like, there's something there that I was probably hiding or something. And then as you go forward in the journey, just become a more fully integrated, you become more fully integrated in terms of mind and body.
Yeah.
But I think the process of shifting the shame from survivor to the perpetrator where it rightly belongs is a very, very mind-bendingly powerful process. And I would highly recommend the intimacy that comes from that process, the ability to be empathetic. The ability to be empathetic to other people's pain comes from actually being very open with yours.
I'm a survivor as well of other trauma, and being in a position, thank you, but being in a position to sort of understand where that comes from, and having survived that, and it's empowering, right? And say, okay, and it was only through therapy that I was able to kind of get there.
Like I remember having this dream of my feet. I was kind of floating, my feet just touching the ground, which is what it feels like. It's so simple, but you feel like your feet have touched ground.
One thing that's interesting is breaking your silence was what was really important to your mental health.
Just growing up, I thought sexual violence was just so normal. It happened so frequently. There was a time where, I've grown up in a place where sexual violence is the norm, right? So I grew up in Argentina, where there's so much like catcalling and touching. I grew up in Delhi, where I swear I was flashed like twice a day. I used public transportation to get on buses. So it was just this feeling of like your body is just not your own, and that's just the way it is, right?
Sure.
Breaking my silence was a break from what I had been taught. It was a break away from shame, and it was a breakthrough in terms of what I believe is justice. I have a very, very intense sense of what is right and what is wrong because I broke my silence, so that I can see it in so many different spheres. We all, like, everyone weirdly navigates, like, the truth lives in a gray area, but it kind of doesn't. It's pretty black and white. How people experience it and all that stuff, perceive it is obviously gray, but the fact that violence against women is a human rights violation never occurred to me until we won the Amnesty International Award for Nirbhaya, and I was completely floored because I never ever thought it was a human rights violation, but it is an extraordinary violation, and it has just been accepted, and because it's been accepted so long doesn't make it right, and you have to step into the space of just seeking justice for yourself and for others, and not normalizing it.
Yeah, what's really wonderful about your art is it sends a message, an educational message to the communities that you're a part of, by helping us sort of live through these experiences, right? Many times folks in our community don't want to hear it. But when you watch a film or a play or a show and you embody and follow the story along, you know what I mean? That is a wonderful way to help the community heal together. So
Yeah,
I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you.
My last question today is something that we're asking all of our guests. You know, we're talking about healing. What advice would you give to your 16-year-old self today? If you could go back in time and talk to your 16-year-old self, what would you tell her?
I've been thinking about this a little bit. I got asked this question a while back, and I said something really dumb. I grew up thinking my story was very ordinary, and in a lot of ways, it really is very ordinary. But when you tell your story, again, truthfully and in the most raw possible form, and as honestly, it becomes extraordinary. The telling of your story is extraordinary and has the power to change people, change their thoughts, their actions, their minds, their world. Your story has the power to shift the world. In all its extraordinary, in all its ordinariness, when taken truthfully, it's extraordinary.
Thank you so much, Poorna. This has been such a moving conversation. I admire you for sharing your compassion, vulnerability, and truth with us today. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Hello again, everyone. I am Malik Pancholi, and I'm so excited to catch up with one of our first and long-standing supporters here at Act to Change. Over the past 7 years, he has continued to uplift our work to end bullying and hate, and I am so grateful that he's here today. He is the first Asian American to win an NBA championship. He's an outspoken advocate for the AAPI community, and he works tirelessly through his foundation to support underserved youth. Please welcome Jeremy Lin.
What's
Hey,
up,
Jeremy?
Malik?
It's so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here again.
No, it's I love doing it. We've had some great conversations, so I'm excited to have another one.
Yeah, well, we're all very, very glad you're here. Just like before we hop in, how are you doing? I know you've had a very busy schedule as of late. How's life?
Life is good. Life is good. I'm back in the United States. I'm back in California right now. So our season ended maybe a couple weeks ago, and I took a little bit of time off. I took a quick staycation in the Bay Area, and now I'm just starting to get back into training, get back into work a little bit. So this is day one back on a job for me, I guess.
It's actually great to hear you talk about taking a little bit of a staycation. We're focusing on mental health this year as part of our program. And so I'm definitely going to ask you about mental health and the things you do to take care of yourself. But before I do, I'm going to hop in with a few other questions. Oftentimes folks from our community, the AAPI community, we're sometimes used to being the only Asian person in the room. So I want to ask you specifically, how does it feel when you are the only Asian man on your team, let alone the only Asian person on the entire court?
It's just something I guess I've gotten used to. You know, there's just such a wide range of reactions that people will have. Sometimes it doesn't feel that different. Sometimes it feels kind of different. And then sometimes people look at me like I'm an alien. Sometimes they disrespect me, or it's immediately like chip on my shoulder. I need to earn my stripes. I need to earn my respect on the court. I think the biggest thing for me now is just being focused on myself, and whatever people think about me, or the awkwardness that may exist, or even when I meet new teammates and they don't really know how to broach the topic, or they don't know much about, my upbringing or my culture. And I think the biggest thing for me that I've learned is just to be proud of myself. Be proud of myself, be myself, and the rest will take care of itself. If they can't accept me because of my skin color, I can't do anything about that, but I don't want to change who I am or be somebody different. And so that's my biggest thing that I've learned is, hey, be proud to be Asian, be proud to be myself, keep living my life the way I think is right. And whatever people think of me is what they think.
You've also been open about how in the sports world, and especially in the NBA, toxic masculinity is something that's often reinforced. Can you share with us how you navigate this intersection, actually, of being AAPI and a man in this profession, especially when societal narratives often devalue or belittle Asian masculinity?
I think for me, growing up, I never felt cool. I never felt handsome. I never felt strong. I never felt anything really in terms of just like having that self confidence, that self esteem. And it was just, like you said, it's like when I watch TV or shows, it's always like they always portray the Asian character as some like, you know, it was just not an accurate depiction. It would be like some guy wearing glasses as a computer hacker or computer engineer in a basement, living in the basement of their parents' home, eating like instant noodles or something. Like it definitely affected the way I viewed myself, and I never felt like, I was gonna be a quote unquote man. And that's one aspect of it, how I grew up and how I saw myself. Then there's the other side that you really touched on as well, the toxic masculinity. And the reason why a lot of, maybe you can say society, you can say sports culture, you can say whatever you want to say. But the reason why a lot of what people define as masculinity is toxic is because it's impossible, right? Like it's like impossible to never feel fear. It's impossible to always be ready to stand up to everything and to overcome it. And we put people on these pedestals and we give them superhuman expectations. Being an Asian American, being a basketball player, being from Harvard, and there's all these different dynamics. What I now define as masculinity and strength is more the ability to recognize what is going on within my mind, body, heart, soul, like what is happening inside of me, and then speaking to other people and getting the appropriate help. I think that's really what masculinity is. Like if I need help and I'm not okay and I ask for it, I think that's really masculine and that's really strong. If I'm feeling fear and I'm feeling anxiety before a game and I go and talk to somebody or I see my therapist or I share that with somebody else and I work through it, that is like, to me, what is very masculine. Being able to address your weaknesses, admit your weaknesses, be vulnerable, be transparent. At the same time, perseverance, resiliency, like those things are also important. And that's, already within the context of how people define masculinity. But the other aspect of it, even crying, even showing emotion, those things, to me, it's like I'm letting it out. That's a healthy part of it. And I'm totally comfortable doing that now. Growing up, I always saw that as a sign of weakness.
So this year, Act to Change is highlighting the importance of mental health and tackling the broader cultural stigma around addressing mental health within AAPI communities. And so I wanted to specifically ask you, I know that you've given back so much of your time and your energy to serving youth, and you've dedicated a lot of your life outside of basketball to your community. Has giving back through your foundation helped you maintain your mental health? How does doing philanthropic work affect not only your career, but also your personal life?
We were at a table this past year. There's 6 of us, including a couple of my agents, the guy who runs my social media, and my masseuse, and other people. All of us, this group, we've been together for over 10 years. And I remember one of them asking, I was explaining panic attacks, and one of them was saying like, "Oh, panic attacks, like, what is that? Is that real? Like, people really experience that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And by the end of the conversation, every single person had gone around saying that they had been through panic attacks or struggle with panic attacks and anxiety, but they had never expressed that to anybody else in the room. Keep in mind, we're a very close group of people who have done everything for 12 years now together, my whole basketball career, and we haven't even talked about that. So if we range between ages like 25 to like 60. If we haven't even discussed that, I mean, think about the next generation and for kids. Like if we aren't able to really advocate for that, be transparent with that, and set an example for the next generation, then it's going to be difficult for them to discuss, and it's going to be swept under the rug like it was for some of us. And so that's something that I really focus on now is trying to normalize it and trying to talk about it, because the truth is there's more people going through it than not, and there's more people around you that are struggling with it, and oftentimes when we don't talk about it, we feel really alone. So to go back to your question, yes, it's a huge part of my foundation and my work. It does give me a lot of purpose, a lot of joy to know that we are helping as personally somebody who has struggled with tremendous anxiety, especially before games or in certain situations. It brings me a lot of purpose to know that we want to try to give as many resources and give as much information and to help the next generation as much as we can regarding mental health. That's so important.
Speaking of the next generation, if you could go back in time and give advice to your 16-year-old self, what would it be?
Right off the bat, I would say slow down and enjoy the journey. I always tell people my biggest regret from the insanity, my biggest regret from my career as a whole is that I never slowed down to enjoy, embrace, cherish what was happening. I was always focused on where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. It was always some future destination that I was chasing, and I couldn't really live in the moment, in the present. If I could go back, I would really do my best to change it, but it's something that I wish I really emphasized and prioritized at a younger age. And for me, that's my personality. I'm always thinking about the next thing, what I want to do, how I want to get better. And sometimes I wish I could just slow down and be in a moment.
Jeremy, thank you again so much for sharing your story, for being so open and honest about your experiences. As you shared in talking about it with your team or the people around you that support you, I think that's something that young people are really going to glean from. That you can talk about the things that you're struggling with, and there will be people who will understand that. That's so important. We are eternally appreciative of your support for Act to Change. And I know that the young people watching this are just as inspired as I am right now. So thank you again for being here.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Good to chat again. 7 years. I'm excited. I'm waiting for next year, Malik.
Lifers, we're in it forever.
Hi, I'm Jamie Locke, and I proudly serve on the board of Act to Change. As a grassroots organization, none of the work we do would be possible without the ongoing support of community organizations, allied partners, and sponsors. I would like to take a moment to highlight a partner who has continuously uplifted our mission here at Act to Change and is committed to amplifying API voices and creating a community where all belong.
I am a trans Asian American. I am the Talent and Business Operations Manager at Sephora.
I am a content creator.
I'm a store director.
When it comes to Sephora, someone finally took a chance on me.
I love my beautiful dark skin. I am proud of my eye shape. I'm proud of everything that sets me apart or makes me unique.
We are people with lived experiences, with compassion, with a heart. I knew I wanted to survive to see my future.
We appreciate every single one of our supporters and hope to continue building a world together without bullying and hate. With that, let's get back to the show.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joseph Canaria, and I proudly serve on the board of Act to Change. I am so excited to be here today with the national champion and two-time Olympian who was the first female American figure skater to nail the triple axel at the Olympics. A feat so rare that she's the third female to ever do so on Olympic ice. I'm so excited to welcome Mirai Nagasu. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. What a great welcome.
You had shared in interviews in the past that it was difficult talking about mental health with your parents as a teenager. Though they've been really extremely supportive of your skating, it was still difficult to talk to them about some issues you were struggling with. Do you have any advice for youth on how to approach this difficult conversation with parents, especially to those watching who also have immigrant AAPI parents?
I did grow up in a period of time where the internet was accessed through dial-up. And as a result, I don't think the internet was as great of a resource as it is now. And I had a really hard time talking to my parents about my mental health because as an athlete, we're always told to stay strong. And any failure or any adversity we face, we're expected to kind of jump right up and just keep going as if it doesn't bother us. And so I had a really hard time talking to my parents about my mental health. Also, at the same time, just talking about access to a therapist or mental health resources, they weren't as easily accessible. And so I believe that those social media can be used as a tool against us, it can also be a great resource in order to access, information, and information is knowledge. And so, although I struggle to talk to my parents about my mental health, I think that using resources like the internet for good, they're right there. And what helped me the most was talking to my friends and peers. I think that, when my friends were opening up to me about the mental health journeys they were going through, I think that that made me realize that talking about where I am mentally and emotionally, that was what was going to help me through whatever issues I was going through.
I think it's really important that we really showcase that sometimes parents and having that open conversation isn't really going to be something that we can all do. So we really appreciate that and like using the resources we do have access to. Thank you. In the past, you have been very open about how in 2014, when you narrowly missed the shot at going to your second Olympics, that you went to a space that made it hard to get out of bed and enjoy your usual activities. Can you share with us how you turned this crushing moment into a source of strength?
I am so incredibly fortunate that I found a sport that I am so passionate about. And to have that moment of my life be so public was really difficult for me because for a really long time, I thought that my purpose in life should be dedicated to my skating. And there's so much more to Mirai Nagasu than just figure skating. And I think that I myself lost sight of that. And so 2014 was something that I took really hard. However, with the help and support of my family and friends, I began to see that there's so much more to the world outside of my skating. And I think that going out and seeking that education really helped me. And during that journey, something I learned about was the word legacy and what it means to different people. And I thought about what my legacy would be in my skating. And so I thought that, adversity is something that we all face, but it's how we handle it that creates a legacy. And I didn't want to be remembered for as the athlete who was left off the team. And so I wanted to come back fighting stronger than ever. And I never in a million years thought that I could land the triple axel at the Olympic Games. Even hearing anyone talk about it, I'm like, wow, I did that. Think about what your legacy is, what it could be, and it's okay to fail because failure is part of the process.
Ow.
I think that's so important for us to remember that you didn't just do it on your first try, right? It took years and years of practice and dedication. Figure skating, especially in such a high caliber environment where body image takes such a center role, makes it easy for skaters to perhaps develop poor self-esteem around their bodies. What has helped in terms of navigating through those pressures? And what was your biggest struggle when it came to seeking help for your mental health?
I am part of a very aesthetic sport. My uniform is actually a costume, and as a female and a jumper, I am often wearing very tight fitting clothes with very short skirts. And I think that there is this negative stigma that you have to be very thin to be able to rotate. And I hope to continue to advocate and promote for a weight to energy ratio where it basically, I believe that we all come in different shapes and sizes, and skating is not a one size fits all. And I think that that's something that society has really, really pushed for as far as body image goes. And I hope that it continues to trickle into sport because a lot of times when I wasn't skating well or when I wasn't jumping well, my coaches would tell me that I weighed too much to be able to rotate as fast as I needed to. And that really messes with your psyche, especially in those developmental stages. And I find that I compete and perform best when I'm feeling like I'm my best self. And when I don't feel good about myself, I'm self-conscious. And, when you're an adolescent growing up, you don't know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And so I didn't know that what I was experiencing was not healthy for me. And so hope that I can continue to tell the next generation, like it's easy to say, love yourself, but it's sometimes hard to follow through. I'm actually on tour with a female skater named Alyssa Liu, and I have to say, the next generation has a strong head just on their shoulders. When there's a topic that she wants to talk about, she's so open to talking about it, and that's courage and bravery that I very much admire. She's got it going on. So Gen Z, excuse me, has it going on. And I hope that I will continue to be inspired by that generation. And I hope that I can continue to learn how to love myself, love my body, love my skating. And I hope the younger generation will as well, because it's all about that legacy. You want to be remembered for empowering the next generation. And I don't want the next generation to make the same mistakes that I did. And so hopefully, Alyssa and I and all the other great skaters will continue to advocate for skating for everyone, sports in general for everyone.
I love this idea that it's so much easier to say to love myself versus actually doing it. And to see younger folks who are actually are going out there and telling themselves this and practicing that is something that is so inspirational, because I'm only 31 and I know when I was a teenager that was not the common message that I was consuming.
Yeah, if there's something that is bothering her, she is the first to say, this is a real topic that we should talk about and we should discuss so we can address it. A lot of the times I was scared to do that. I wanted to fit into the mold. I felt like I had to be perfect at times. And I think that the next generation is more about breaking the mold and accepting each other and how we come as is. And I think that is something that I hope that we can all accept from each other, because when you feel accepted, it's the best feeling ever, to be included and to feel good about yourself. And I think there's room for us for in this world for all of us to be as we are. So hopefully we can continue to promote it in our society.
Inclusion and belonging and this sense of feeling accepted is so powerful, and it really seems like the younger generation has caught on to that like a lot earlier than all of us. Yeah,
I think excuse me, I think that we maybe started that trend, but they really took it and they're really going for it. But I think we all have our place in this world, and so yeah, we'll hopefully be able to see more Asian American representation all across the board.
Our last question, Mirai, is if you can give advice to your 16-year-old self, what would it be?
I think I would tell myself to stop worrying so much. I felt like I had a lot of pressure to qualify for the Olympic Games, and I think that I was really hard on myself. I thought that I had to be the best to be placed on the team, and I would sacrifice so much of my life for my skating. And I think that a balanced lifestyle would have really kept me in check. And I think that it's good to be hard on yourself and to work so hard that you can't get out of bed. You're so mentally exhausted. However, it's okay to allow yourself to have fun. I don't think I ever took a vacation until I was 21 years old. And, my parents did a great job of teaching me a strong work ethic. But having a little bit of vacation, letting loose, enjoying life is something that I would tell my 16-year-old self.
I think it's incredibly important and powerful for our young audiences to be able to see and hear that their role models also have had their own struggles, and that their journey to shattering Olympic records wasn't easy.
I think it's so funny when you say role model, but hopefully my voice, whatever I said, does help someone, because I wish that I had heard, like, it's okay to be so stressed out that you don't know what to do with it. Let's talk it out. Let's find you the right resources. Let's get you to a better place. I think that if I had reached up for a helping hand sooner, I think that there would have been more people to help me out of whatever it was, and I was afraid to ask. So hopefully, it's funny to hear myself as a role model, but I hope that there is someone who hears this message and and can act on it.
Seriously, we cannot express our appreciation and gratitude enough for your support of Act to Change. So thank you so much for your time today, Mirai, and we really hope to continue working with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Jill Yu, and I am a co-founder and one of the managing directors of Act to Change. And I'm so excited to be here today with the founder of the Very Asian Foundation, amplifying diverse AAPI voices through education, storytelling, and community connection. The Very Asian hashtag was born from, unfortunately, a horrifically racist voicemail that was sent to Michelle after she shared her New Year's tradition of eating dumplings.
I ate dumpling soup. That's what a lot of Korean people do.
Which was quote unquote being very Asian.
Your Asian anchor mentioned something about being Asian and Asian people eat dumplings. She's being very Asian. She can keep her Korean to herself.
And after sharing this voicemail on social media, the AAPI community reclaimed this notion of what being very Asian means and established a sense of pride with all of us. So without further ado, I am so honored to welcome the Emmy Award-winning newscaster, Michelle Lee. Michelle, welcome.
Hi, Jill. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the hashtag Very Asian, how you use this to reclaim that racist incident and turn it into a viral moment?
You know, I really feel like I don't get to take credit for it. I just simply experienced this. I put it out there in the world, and honestly, the world responded, which was pretty amazing. My friend Gia Vang, she's a news anchor in Minneapolis, and she's the one who wrote about Hmong foods and traditions and used the hashtag Very Asian, and people took off with it. You know, it was just so amazing to see the world respond. We had people from Holland, Germany, Korea, Australia, Canada. We had so many people not only just sharing their stories, their traditions, but then also people who felt like they haven't been seen or felt like they weren't Asian enough, really using that hashtag to reclaim their very Asianness, you know, whether it was adoptees or people in the LGBTQ plus community or people who are of mixed race. It just felt so beautiful. And at the same time, for me personally, it has been, yes, a whirlwind.
I mean, I can imagine. It's funny when that hashtag came out, it was one of those moments of claim your power. And I was just so thrilled actually, because being very Asian used to be considered, you know, not in the most positive light. It was told like as kind of a slander, like, why are you being too Asian, being very Asian? But you know what? Hell yeah, I am very Asian.
Hell yeah, yeah.
You were a guest on Ellen, and in fact, you were on so many other talk shows that have highlighted all the work you've done with this Very Asian Foundation.
I really feel like everything about Very Asian was created by people. It's always going to be about people. It happened to me, so I get it, and I'm honored and totally humbled to be a part of this conversation, you know, and to help maybe even lead in some ways. But I really feel like it has been something that everyone else has done, and I'm just honored to be, I guess, leading the ship. But I mean, really, people tell me what matters to them, and I think of like how many stories have yet to be told. Like my son is 3 years old, he is of mixed race, and to me it's like we still can't find stories for him. I mean, there are stories out there that are similar, but none that really speak to our family. And then when I just talk to people in messages on Instagram or Twitter or social media, there are so many people who feel like there are just so many things that they want to share with the world, and also things that people want to buy for themselves. You know, they want to see themselves in spaces. This idea that we can be very Asian, we can be, I think very Asian to me means bringing your full humanity to the table and to the spaces that we're in. So whether you are a quarter Japanese, half Korean, you know, whatever, or, you know, or you have an immigrant story or whatever it may be, I feel like we have to be able to reclaim who we are and feel pride about who we are, so that honestly, so that we can go out and make the world a better place as well.
You know, the community is healing, right? We had a hashtag Stop Asian Hate, and now we are trying and pivoting to taking pride, claiming back our power, healing the community by being proud of who we are, our authentic self. I mean, and being damn proud to eat dumplings for New Year's, you know?
Yeah. You know, for the last 2 years, it's been really hard to be a person who looks Asian in this country and in the world, really. We've seen so much hate and discrimination and actual violence. It is wonderful that we can have a moment to take pride and have joy. I think it just really goes to say that we can live in a dual existence where we can have grief in one hand and gratitude in the next. I hope that with Very Asian, people can look at some of the unsexy work out there that needs to be done so that we can move and advance our community and really normalizing our stories so that people say, oh my gosh, not only is that very Asian, but that's very American or that's very German or whatever it is. To me, I think as an Asian American, I share so much of the experience with people who've had just a maybe a different upbringing simply because we are Asian American. We have our own culture as well as whatever our potential like origin countries are.
This actually reminds me, so like in a recent interview, I think you shared after you listened to the racist voicemail, you mentioned that 42 years in your body that has absorbed 42 years of racism, discrimination, and at times like actual violence. So how have you managed to maintain your mental strength and perseverance, especially as an Asian American woman in local news broadcasting?
Sometimes I think I don't do a good enough job of taking care of myself or listening or doing self care. I know that self care needs to be active self care, so I really try to do that. But it is hard to live in dual spaces and liminal spaces because we do try so hard to be accepted and not bullied and not listen to microaggressions and to stand up to hate. And then at the same time, I do find myself feeling othered on a consistent basis. And I'm not saying that, everything is bad. I'm just saying that, you do find yourself in these spaces where sometimes you have to navigate racism and discrimination and you don't know how to really get out of it. And I think that these last 2 years have been so brutal on students living through the pandemic where they have felt invisible in their schools and at the same time hyper visible within their communities. I have a student that I know of whose family owns a restaurant, and they've had a lot of harassment over these last 2 years. In some cases, when I was talking to some students, some of them have really struggled with mental health and anxiety, getting bullied in junior high or high school or college or in your workplace. It's all very important and it's all very real for that individual. And so, when I was a kid and literally was like, I felt like I was fighting for my life every day. I thought so poorly of myself, and I think what kept me on this earth? What kept me going? I don't know. I mean, it's just like sometimes I think it's the universe. I don't know what kept me here because it was a real struggle for a few years. And then you get into college, you get into your workspaces, and you still kind of encounter variations of that. I do talk therapy. I talk to my friends. I find mentors in my industry, but it's been tough.
But it's like that talk therapy, finding those trusted advisors, finding your community to speak to. And honestly, individuals like yourself, like folks who are on television who look like me, when I think back when I was younger, I actually wanted to be on TV, and I remember telling my mom I would love to be a news anchor, and then I decided not to because I didn't see anyone. No one looked like me. There was only Connie Chung.
Just this year, I got called Connie Chung, out on the story.
Me too.
Yeah, and I'm like, first of all, thank you for calling me Connie Chung, but also that is an insult. So can you get a new one? Can you think of any other Asian person on television?
Oh my goodness.
And you know what? That actually really inhibited me from reaching my dreams too. I think of everything in increments. Like, let's just get through the day, or let's just get through the week, or let's just see what happens with this contract. I still don't have it figured out, and I really think that some of that has to do with the lack of representation that we've seen in the industry. I mean, there are a lot more people, but it's still not an equal playing field.
If you could give advice to your 16-year-old self, what would it be?
Just keep going. If you are really struggling, I mean, I struggled so much when I was 16. And I just really needed someone to just say it was going to be okay. Just keep going. Just try to make it through. And also, I never felt like I was good enough. I never felt like I had the same access to things or was smart enough or pretty enough or I mean, name any adjective. I never thought I was good enough to do anything. My parents were so supportive, but I just didn't believe it. And I think a lot of that had to do with me being Asian. And if I could just go back in time, I would say just keep chipping away because the consistency that you're bringing every day by just keeping at it will measure up to something. The work that I do every day is leading to something. I never would have imagined that I would be like the face of like some sort of viral moment, right? But when I look back in time, I think of all the work that, I've done in certain spaces, whether it's me being like on like a DEI board for our company or me being a part of like a really strong organization that I love at the Asian American Journalists Association or volunteering in this space or whatever it may be. Like all of these things led me to make that decision so that when Ellen DeGeneres gave me a check that I could go, I know what I'm going to do with this money. I don't know how the logistics of everything, but I know what we're going to do with this money. I will say, I'm in my 40s and I was like in my mid career thinking, well, what else am I going to do with my life? Or what else am I going to do in my career? I think now I have a much clearer purpose of what else I'm going to do. So it's like never stop imagining for yourself, never stop dreaming for yourself, and just keep going because you don't know what it's going to lead to.
Well, thanks so much, Michelle, for being on the show. Just want to let you know that you are enough. You are beautiful. You are such a model to our community. We're so thankful for your presence.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so humbled and honored. And thank you so much. I know that we'll work together in the future.
For those of you watching, please stay tuned for a conversation between Act to Change board member Nancy Tien and the wonderful Nick Dodani.
Hi, y'all. I'm Nancy Tien, a board member with Act to Change, education advocate, gamer, and dog parent that's obsessed with cat videos. Don't tell my dogs. And I'm so excited to welcome the incredibly talented actor, comedian, writer, who is one of the most watched emerging talents in the entertainment industry today and was just featured on the GLAAD list. He is a co-founder of The Salon, a forum for South Asian American artists and executives to accelerate their creative development in TV and film through community organizing. He can be seen in last year's amazing feature adaptation of the Tony Award-winning musical Dear Evan Hansen. He also stars as the quirky and charismatic Zahid on Netflix's Atypical and recurred in season 2 of Netflix's Trinkets. Without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome Nick Dodani. Hello. Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good, good. It's so exciting to be here. It's an honor to sit with you and get to chat with you. We thank you so much. I guess we can get started and jump right in. Being a South Asian gay man in this industry, you talk about it openly in a lot of your stand-up shows, and I would love to kind of start off our first question with if you could share with us, what was it like to come out to your family, and did that at all impact your overall mental health, especially as a young actor and comedian?
So I came out to my family when I was 18 years old, and it was mixed reactions. There was some confusion and difficulty kind of understanding what was going on, but I was really lucky in that my family was really open to having conversations and talking about it. And after some hard work and tough combos, we are in a really awesome place. They're incredibly supportive um, and help spread love and joy to other people in the community, especially in the Indian community. And it's been great. In terms of the industry, I've been out since kind of forever. I never was really in the closet as an actor, comedian, writer, whatever. It's been a strange experience because I think I've come up in a time that is more accepting and definitely more inclusive than it ever has been. But there's obviously still a lot of homophobia, and there's a lot of just queer phobia across the board, and it's been a challenge navigating that. But I'm also really heartened by the insane number of openly LGBTQ actors and performers and writers and directors and producers and activists, and I think Hollywood's getting gayer every day.
Being in this certain times right now, like there is a lot of rising like issues, being like our most open and prideful selves, but I think there's a lot of solidarity in it. So thank you for that. Hopping to our next question. So this year's May 18th event theme is around mental health and coming together as a community to heal. In a recent interview about the incredible movie adaptation you were a part of, dear Evan Hansen, you shared that you hope folks, especially young audiences who are watching, can walk away after seeing the movie with that feeling that sometimes it's okay to not be okay, right? Can you share more about what that means specifically to you?
I think we all struggle with mental health issues, whether that's depression or anxiety. I think more people than we know are also neurodivergent, and I think things should be talked about, right? Like, we all have our things. We all struggle. We all thrive. We all survive. We all fail, and I think it's just really important that we talk about it and get rid of the stigma. And especially people who are, I think, in Hollywood and the public eye, I think it's important to show that we're not, without those problems. Everyone is affected, and especially the last few years, it's just mental health has taken a toll across everywhere.
So the last one is about how you co-founded the Salon, a forum for South Asian artists and executives in entertainment to accelerate in their creative development, especially in South Asian Americans in TV and film. And it's all done through community organizing. Your members of this program receive mentorship in their careers and help increase representation in the industry. What advice would you give to young aspiring South Asian filmmakers and artists? And who were some of the folks in your life that you leaned on for this mentorship to get where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, the advice I would give is to just make the thing. If you want to be a writer, write. If you want to act, make a short film. And it's easier said than done, but I think we have to go the extra mile of proving we can do a thing. And so just doing the thing is always really helpful. I also really love, coming up, like going to class was really important. Acting class, writing class, any kind of artistic class, so you can get those creative juices flowing. And then the other part is connect with other South Asian folks. That was why we started the salon, is so that we could all honestly just hang out and get to know each other, because so much of collaboration comes from just knowing each other and being able to build community. And specifically in regards to mental health, it's so important to have community, to know you're not going through it alone, to talk about the specific issues that we face, as Asian Americans, as South Asian Americans. Really, it's like finding your tribe and finding your people. And if that community doesn't exist where you are, making it and building it, and if that's not possible, finding it online.
I wish the internet was as vast as it was when I was growing up, because seeing all the representation and the ways that folks are open to talk about issues, and knowing other folks face the same issues I have, I think about all the time, like what would it be like growing up? I mean, I had like AIM and all Hotmail, but that nearly didn't cover the bases. If you could give advice to your 16-year-old self, what would it be?
I'd probably say get a therapist. And I don't mean that tongue in cheek. I mean that for real. I think I started therapy in my 20s, and it would have been amazing to have done that when I was a young queer figuring shit out.
Congratulations on being announced as part of the GLAAD list, and congrats on just all your successes and achievements thus far. We so appreciate your continued support here at Act to Change. We cannot thank you enough for your willingness to share your stories about your identity and your experiences. I know so many members of our community and our audience can relate to what you've shared today, and even in your shows and in your comedy. And I hope that we can continue working and collaborating with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all the work that all of you do. It's really, really awesome to see.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elaine Dang, and I am an Act to Change board member. I embarked on my own personal journey to tending my mental health as an adult in my 20s. What started as a way for me to make sense of the many negative feelings I was experiencing turned into a discovery of what it means to be whole, and how my family history and growing up as a Chinese Vietnamese girl in the United States impacted all of that. I am now a new mother to a beautiful 5-month-old, and I'm thinking a lot about their world and how they will grow up and how they will approach their own mental well-being. So these are only a few reasons why I am so excited to be sharing this space on this roundtable with 5 guests. We have writer and licensed psychotherapist Ivy Kwong. She offers trauma-informed and social justice-minded therapy and specializes in first and second generation Asian Americans. And we have 4 incredible youth. We have Arvin Kim, who is an 11th grade student from Montgomery County, Maryland, and has advocated for improvements in public education in his own community. Most recently, he ran his own campaign for a seat on the Montgomery County Board of Education on a platform centered around educational equity and mental health support. Next, we have Shrika Sudhir. She is an 11th grader in Chicago, also a board member for her school's class board, and a member of Elevate, a group focusing on ending domestic violence against Asian American women. Ela Jalil. She's a senior at Winston Churchill High School in Potomac, Maryland, and is the event planner for the Asian American Progressive Student Union, where she works to destigmatize mental health in Asian American communities. And finally, we have Jaylen Rabago. She's an 8th grader from Oahu, Hawaii, who has a range of interests such as baking, American Sign Language, and owning her own business. To kick off, I would love to start with the term mental health itself. What does mental health mean to you?
Mental health is just my mental well-being. It's where I can check in with myself and see how I'm doing. It's not only physical health that's important, it's also my mental health and my mental well-being, which is especially important now with my senior year and college and everything. I've definitely been having to keep sure that I'm well in all fronts.
Yeah, mental health really has to do with one's wellness and one's well-being, and is really measured in the how it affects our lives. It's a huge defining factor in how we operate every day, how we feel, how we think, and how we interact with the people around us. It's definitely something I've seen within myself in my own reflection, and definitely plays out at large across the community that I've witnessed. It's a big part of what our community can do to serve people, to serve ourselves. Making sure that our mental health is supported is definitely really, really critical to making sure that we're really pushing for the betterment of our community as a whole.
To me, mental health really means how one feels mentally in the past, in their present state, and in the future. And I think that mental health is especially important because while people really should value others, the person they should value most is themselves, and they shouldn't really need to have the need to prioritize other people over themselves, and even if they are struggling, because you're really the most important person in your own life.
It's really who you are and your mental well-being, and I believe that it's important because at the end of the day, if you're not caring for yourself, there isn't really a way that you can care for others.
Would love to now pass off to Ivy. After hearing from the youth and from your own experience as an expert here, what is mental health?
Mental health encompasses our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. So it really impacts how we respond to stress, our relationships, decision making. It's actually also directly correlated with physical health.
Especially I know from my own family history, that was something that my parents never wanted to address or talk about. And it only took until I was an adult to really think about it head on. So I'd love to hear from a couple of folks. Do you feel like there's stigma in mental health in your community?
When I'm dealing with mental health problems, it's always passed off as like, oh, you're just stressed. There's nothing to really be worried about. And that's something that I've struggled with in finding ways to get help. Because when something is so stigmatized, people just don't talk about it. It's hard to open up about your own experiences with it.
And I think, especially when you're looking to adults in your lives, the people who kind of guide you, it can be really, really difficult.
Yeah, there's definitely a stigma around mental health in the Asian American community that I've noticed, that it makes you weak and it's not a problem that is something that needs to be addressed. And so my work has been getting Asian American psychologists and psychiatrists and Asian Americans working in the mental health field and having them talk to both our generation and then our parents' generation, because it also needs to start from the top. I think that our community is starting to gain a greater awareness around mental health, and that it just takes more and more people to step forward and deem it important to remove the stigma around it.
So Ivy, I would love to hear what you're seeing in terms of stigma around mental health, and how does, potentially the API culture, I know there's so many cultures within it, but what kind of things have you seen across different Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders that you've worked with, and how stigma and culture plays a role in it?
The way we speak of mental health is from a very Eurocentric kind of lens and perspective. And I think that Western psychology has really failed to consider a lot of cultural nuances when it comes to mental health. In AAPI culture, so often there are collectivist ideals. There's stoicism that's really valued. So endure hardship without complaining is seen as a virtue. And therefore, sometimes you resist seeking relief until the suffering becomes intolerable. And there's also culturally a strong resistance to seeking outside help. There's a lot of shame in that and wanting to, again, the idea of like saving face. So let's make sure that we pretend everything's okay. And if something's not okay, then it's hard to address. It's so great to hear that so many folks are working on actively destigmatizing mental health, because it really is, again, something that's just as important as physical health. And again, being directly correlated, we can't have one thrive without the other.
In particular, the last 2 years, with COVID-19 pandemic, and with that, we saw the rise in anti-Asian hate and violence. We've seen this racial reckoning, in particular with the Black Lives Matter movement, and now with the war, I think there's just a lot where it seems like people are potentially realizing we can't pretend things are all okay. Would love to hear kind of how have current events impacted you personally or your community when it comes to mental health?
I know a lot of people, especially regarding this current war that's going on, a lot of people have been affected by it. A lot of people's families have been affected by it as well. And I think regarding the recent surge in Asian American crimes, a lot of us have felt at least like slightly unsafe, at least not within our communities, but just when we're going outside. I know a lot of people, especially those who are East and Southeast Asian, those who I know, have been very concerned about what's been going on. It takes a lot of toll on your mental health, because you have to make sure that your family is safe, your loved ones are safe, and that takes a lot of toll on people, especially the younger generation, because a lot of them aren't used to it just yet.
As you're kind of seeing other people in your community and talking about it, it kind of brings a different level of, at least for me, in what I was hearing from your response, level of presence about it. And hearing about it on the news kind of creates, I think, this sense of both community, but also, what is going on when we're seeing this rise in anti-Asian hate and violence. Is there anyone else that wants to kind of comment on how current events may be impacting your mental health or your community's mental health?
Our wellness as individuals and as members of a community is super reflective of the things going on around us. And it's only natural that with such stressors playing out in the world at whatever level or whatever scale, it comes back to us as individuals and plays a role in our mental health. It's really, really important that that destigmatization and the national conversation around mental health that we're talking about, does move forward. And as it does move forward, it's inclusive of everyone in our country and that reflective of diversity we see, and definitely incorporating those nuances we see between cultures and generations, and super, super important that it happens like that.
So, what advice would you give to youth who are really interested in wanting to overcome the stigma in their communities? Or who may want to seek help in mental health, but feel like they won't be supported in doing so?
I think number one, acknowledgement is really important as a first step, understanding that there is a stigma that exists. Mental health within itself as a nuanced and complex issue. I think that the best way to kind of go off of that and build off of that is to educate yourself, to understand the resources that you have out there, to learn about mental health, learn about yourself, and what you can do, connecting with the resources you might have, whether it be, the counselors in your school or the local psychologists that you might know about, all of these different resources that we have to engage in bettering our own mental health and understanding what mental health means as a whole for everyone.
I have my own personal struggles with mental health, and something that I found difficult was speaking up to my parents and just being comfortable enough to actually talk about what I was struggling with. And I want my parents to see me in a certain way. And because of all the stigmas that I've learned, I didn't want to go to my parents for my mental health because I thought they would see me as less than and they wouldn't see me as perfect. But I think having a mutual understanding of knowing that this isn't something that you should be ashamed of really helped, and just learning how to navigate mental health together.
It's scary to kind of share more of yourself and not knowing how people that you love, like your parents, may react and may think of you. And Ivy, what advice would you give parents, and caregivers to support the youth in their lives who may be going through some mental health challenges and maybe worried about like what Jaylen shared about not being perceived as perfect, being perceived as less than?
First, for parents, again, it's so important to see mental health is just important as physical health. So if your child was sick or if they broke their arm, of course you'd want to take them to a doctor so the doctor can help find out what's wrong and find out how to help them. So if it doesn't mean you failed, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with your child, it just means that you want to help them heal with hopefully a professional who can help find out what's going on and support them in the healing process. So one thing I encourage parents to do is to ask your child how they're doing and to be open to listening, to really hear what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, and to ask what would be helpful for them. A lot of times children have an idea of what they might need, but maybe are scared to ask for it. So if you offer a safe and supportive space for them to be heard, then there can be a much higher chance of everyone being able to collaborate to work together to ultimately all be able to heal and succeed together. And for youth, there's this idea that we have to be a certain way for our parents' love and acceptance and approval. And so, first of all, for those who have, for those who are, for those who are thinking about it, asking for support for your mental health is such a courageous act and takes so much strength and also honoring of your own well-being. So one way I recommend you approach your parents, a few options. I'll give you options. It's always good to recognize we have a choice. One option is to write a letter. So to write a letter of all the things that you would like to say very specifically, very clearly, so that you only share what you feel comfortable sharing, and so it can have the chance to be read and received. So whether it's a text or a letter, writing it out. Second of all, you can write a little script if you'd like in order to approach your parents. One way that I've really supported AAPI youth in approaching their parents is by stating very specifically how you're being affected. So I found that sometimes Asian parents can be uncomfortable if you say like, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. They're like, what does that mean? But if you share very, very specific symptoms, like, hey, I'm having a really hard time focusing on studying. It's becoming really difficult for me to get out of bed. I have really low energy. So if you can kind of identify what's happening, what you're experiencing, your parents can understand that, oh, you're having trouble focusing on studying. Oh, you're having trouble getting out of bed. Like what's going on? And then if you can say, and I know that you love me, I know you want me to succeed, and I want to succeed too. And one way that I think I can do that is by getting some support when it comes to mental health, so that someone can help me with what's going on. I don't feel equipped to handle this on my own, and I'd really appreciate if I could have your help and support in doing this. Another possibility is speaking to your general care practitioner, your physician, a pediatrician, because sometimes Asian parents can listen to people in positions of authority, i.e. doctors and so if you can explain kind of what you've been going through, and if they can kind of approach your parents with, hey, I think that it might be helpful for your child to see somebody, hear some resources and referrals. So if you want to look online and find some options for therapists you might want to see, it can even be kind of an easier entry point. Like, I found what I think can help me. Can you support me in this? And so those are just some options for parents and children to start having conversations. And again, there can be a lot of shame when it comes to parents hearing that their children are okay, and the shame is rooted in fear. I want the best for them. I want a better life than I do. And by supporting your children's mental health, you can help them have an even better life and set them up for success and thriving.
That's super helpful to give our youth here and youth watching different options. As we're talking about strategies and techniques, I think that's something that a lot of people want. And as we were talking to you all in preparation for this, you all ask questions about that. What are different strategies or techniques I could use to address my own mental health struggles? I would love to hear from some youth, kind of what you do personally today Why don't I kick it off to Ela? I think you shared a bit about meditation. Can you share more about that or any other techniques you use to help you with your mental health?
Yeah, my aunt's a yoga teacher, so she has me going through a lot of breathing. And then I also have found that going on walks, long walks where I can just clear my head or I can talk to my friends, I found that those definitely help my mental health because I sometimes struggle with getting anxious thoughts out of my head. They'll sometimes repeat. So I found that walking kind of gives me a space to let them out. I found that writing down, like Ivy was mentioning, was definitely very helpful. And I've also found baking and just any outlet that I can find where my mind is occupied.
Anyone else want to share techniques or strategies you use for yourself?
My life is often defined by where I allocate my time throughout the day. And as a result, I find myself often not having any time that I don't realize is necessary to make sure I have the time I need to rest, to understand that to work myself all day isn't the most productive or healthy thing to do. Every day, I try to make sure that I allocate time for myself to take a step back from whatever I might be stressed about or working on, and really engage in reflection and to let myself have that time to forget about everything.
I'm a very artistic person. I prefer to get my thoughts out in writing, in poetry, and in art. It's a really good way to do something you enjoy while also acknowledging that you have certain mental health issues and that you need to take a break from whatever it is you're doing right now. I also just kind of just like to pace around my room, sort of take deep breaths, tell myself that maybe it's going to be okay. For myself, it's and a lot of sort of stem from my experience with colorism, and I wrote a lot about that. And I sort of told myself many affirmations that I was beautiful, that I didn't need to care what other people thought of me. And I think just telling yourself that is one of the first steps to really helping yourself.
How did you actually realize that colorism was one of the core things that was making you feel less than or making you kind of question your own beauty?
The first thing I did was sort of assess my surroundings. I had a lot of friends who were Caucasian, who were North Indian, and had a lot of fair skin. I had an experience with the Fair and Lovely cream, which I will tell you is not very good. And it made me realize how much I sort of didn't like the way I looked. And I started just looking for people who all had like darker skin, who didn't have as fair skin as many like a lot of Indian actresses do. Like if you see like many Bollywood movies, you'll see so many fair actresses. I kind of realized that that was making me feel really bad. So assessing your surroundings and sort of just coming to that realization, it does work differently for different people depending on their situation. I think for me, it was just understanding that what I was doing, my actions, and what was around me really made me realize that I have an issue and that I need to do something about it. Really.
Ivy, I see you nodding a lot. What are you thinking about as you're hearing Shrika share?
Recognizing what is our stuff versus what is racism and society and culture and all of these things that we are told that we are, all these standards of beauty and success, and really kind of taking a moment, continuously taking moments to check in about what is actually true, what is most true, what is being learned externally, and to filter that. And so important to make time and space to connect with yourself so that you can actually hear what that truth is and remember what that is and cultivate and curate and kind of feed what nourishes you and energizes you versus drains you and exhausts you. Is this a standard that is actually yours, or is it something external that's telling you that it's not enough, right? Because living in a society that values the proximity to whiteness is so exhausting. And yes, to coming back to our resilience, our beauty, our knowledge, our wisdom, our truth, and yes to what Arvin's sharing about making and protecting time for your mental health. And you can find this through art, through journaling, through music, through movement, through being in nature, through cuddling with your dog, through spending time with people who really see you and support you and care about you. When we're in our sympathetic state, which is go, 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 do, if we're just going and doing driven by anxiety, we don't really connect to whether or not this is what we're actually wanting to do and how we're actually wanting to do it. And even when we're resting, sometimes, which is our dorsal state, if we go, 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 do without being able to stop or being aware why we're doing what we're doing and hit a wall and go into a dorsal state of exhaustion. When you're connected to your ventral state, again, connection to yourself, to others, to the world, to nature, you can choose to do and you can choose to rest. And you can choose how you will show up in the world for yourself and for others.
So Jaylen, would finally love to hear from you. How do you find ways to connect to yourself?
I've deeply rooted my worth on everything that I'm doing, like my academics, the things that I've achieved. And it's always been hard to find time for myself where I really get to think about my emotions. Something that I've done is I've turned to reading a lot. It gives me like the outlet that I need for like creativity and just to escape into another world essentially. And something that I found helpful is being particular about the types of books I'm reading and making sure that they invoke positive emotions.
So drawing those boundaries, knowing what feels good to you, and accepting those things in, and saying no to others.
Yeah, I would love to share just, Jane, so love how you notice how your body receives different stories, different images. It's actually been shown that when you take in traumatizing images, words, even movies, you can micro traumatize yourself on little levels because your brain can't necessarily tell the difference between what's real and what's not. And stories are such a powerful way that we can heal. We can see examples of the hero's journey and how people who are going through their own experiences, fiction or nonfiction, can give us strength and awareness about how we could potentially be. So reading, absolutely another way to more deeply connect with yourself, especially feeling the resonance with stories that nurture parts of yourself that you would like to strengthen and grow and deepen.
I'm not sure who's watched Turning Red, but I felt when I watched that, I saw myself as and I saw myself as the red panda, and it was, yeah, I ended up sobbing because I felt like a part of me was able to be seen through that movie, and that story was so healing. So thanks for sharing, Jaylen and Ivy, for adding that perspective. So something we had not directly talked about when we were sharing strategies is seeking professional help. So Ivy, what advice would you give youth or others who want to seek professional help for their mental health?
Such a courageous act to recognize that you want and are ready to advocate for your wellness, your healing, and truly for those who've come before you. I always say, like, you, and I really believe, like, you are your ancestors' greatest strength. Like, all those who came before you sacrificed what they did, struggled what they did to hope that you could have a better life. And one thing that you can do in this space, not just to survive like so many of our parents and grandparents had to do, right? You talk about turning red, and there's also intergenerational trauma. Their parents are just repeating what their parents have experienced and their parents have experienced. And for those who've been through trauma that we have not, there's this recognition that they are doing their best, and sometimes what they are doing is not necessarily what we would hope or want, right? We talk about how sometimes Asian parents received love from their parents as criticism, as you're not enough, as let me push you by motivating you, by threatening you, or by saying all these horrible worst case catastrophes because we want what's best. We want you to thrive and we don't want you to struggle like we struggle. But it comes across in a way where we can experience a lot of stress and anxiety as a result of their stress and anxiety that perhaps they're still processing. So if you are the first in your entire lineage to potentially seek support through mental health, then thank you for doing the work to heal yourself now and also generations before and after you. Speaking up as I offered the possibilities for earlier to share what you would like and what you need, the script of, saying, hey, I know that you love me, want me to succeed, and I want to too. Right now, here's how I'm struggling, and I think therapy could help me. I'm grateful for everything you do, and I'd be really grateful for help and support with this as well. Having the courage to reach out in spaces that you feel can be safe and supportive. So if your parents don't have a response that feels helpful and hopeful, then please reach out to teachers, guidance counselors, relatives, friends, online communities. There are so many spaces where you can access support for you advocating for you. There are crisis text lines. You can text HOME, HOME, to 741-741. You can go to 7cups.com, which is like a free anonymous text and chat with trained listeners and counselors. There's a U.S. National Suicide Prevention Hotline, 800-273-8255. There are also tons of apps where you can express yourself and be heard in non-judgmental spaces like Hear Me, Vent, and Paraline.
And Ivy, we asked the question of how important do you think it is for API youth to find a therapist who may share their background? Should I find another API therapist to work with? What are your thoughts on that?
It can certainly be helpful to work with someone who is understanding of the cultural history and background. I've talked to so many AAPI clients who have said, when my white therapist heard about how difficult my relationship with my family was, like, just cut off your parents, just cut them off. And they're like, I'm Asian, I can't cut off my parents. Like, that's not what you do. So how can you support folks in honoring kind of just the values of the culture while also honoring and taking care of your mental health? So I think sometimes working with an AAPI therapist or a culturally responsive therapist, as you're looking for a therapist, you can always ask them very direct questions. Like, what's your experience working with folks from a cultural background? What is your experience working with folks with AAPI families, and how has that impacted your work? And what's been your own experience with that? Finding the right fit is so important because everyone comes in with their own biases, and there can be ignorance, lack of awareness can actually do harm if folks are not aware and educated in how to respond with cultural awareness, sensitivity, and responsiveness. So I think that there can be a shortage sometimes and difficulty in finding accessibility. A lot of states have changed their licensing rules. So you might have to check state by state, but if you're in one state, you might actually be able to see a therapist in another state because of the shortage of advance. So definitely check and see so that you don't have to be limited in terms of your search for someone who might be supportive of you in your healing journey.
Talking about mental health resources and options, it's not equitable for everyone. Ivy, why do you think, what are some of the barriers for why resourcing is not equitable for everyone? Also, I think, Jaylen, you had talked to us about in Hawaii, you may feel like there's even less there also. So, why might that be the case?
I think that accessibility has been challenging again because of the stigma. I think that we are making progress, but we still have a long way to go. And so being able to, number one, just acknowledge that there's something that we want to work on and heal together. And number two, coming together to bring together shared resources. And also healing can happen in community. And there's so many spaces now. There's Subtle Asian Mental Health Group, on Facebook. There's so many online communities as well where you don't have to be with this alone. So I'm so grateful for spaces like this where we can have open, honest conversations.
Does anyone want to take Ivy's question? If you've had personal experience seeking out professional help, or perhaps someone who has, or folks that you've worked with?
When I was doing my event for Asian American mental health and I was seeking out Asian American psychologists, therapists, it was definitely a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be. And I realized how much of a minority Asian Americans are in this field of mental health. I did find some amazing organizations, but then I was realizing that when I'm looking for someone, that it is going to be probably a longer process than what other people will have to go to if they aren't seeking out an AAPI therapist.
And don't give up hope. We are out there, and you can ask therapists that you talk to for referrals as well. There are, again, wonderful resources, Asians for Mental Health, Asians Do Therapy, Asian Mental Health Associations. So yes, there are more and more opportunities to seek out support and resources specifically for what we may need support with.
I would like to add very briefly about the importance and really how important it is to call upon the things around us, the things, the infrastructure we have in place to make sure that we are making sure that everyone has access to resources and being supported. One of the areas that nationwide we really need to improve in as a nation is school psychologists and other resources similar to that, making sure that everyone across the nation, students and adults, have the resources they need, understanding that mental health support is healthcare in the workplace and in the school buildings.
Elected officials do watch some of our recordings, so that's to them and to making it happen. And I love that, mental health is healthcare. Well, thank you again. This was just an incredible experience, an honor for me to moderate and really just ask back the great questions you all sent in. So thanks for the thoughtfulness, and thank you, Ivy, for your presence and gentle guidance and expertise during this conversation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Elaine, for facilitating and holding this space and just supporting everyone, parents, teachers, organizations, schools, society, and really coming together to recognize how important it is to care for our mental health individually and collectively, and what we can do on every level to impact that change.
On behalf of Act to Change, thank you to all of our incredible guests today for showing up with such courage, vulnerability, and hope for a more inclusive and mental health-centered future. Your stories are so inspiring. I'd like to thank each member of Act to Change's board, because without the passion and dedication of each and every one of you, we wouldn't be where we are today. To all of our sponsors for this event, we are so grateful for your support of this important initiative, supporting AAPI youth and communities. And to all of those of you watching and joining us today for the 4th annual AAPI Day Against Bullying and Hate, let's all continue to come together across all our communities to heal ourselves and to especially empower young people. Together, we can end bullying and hate. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month and happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month.